Hi, this is Andy Hoffman of CryptoGoldCentral.com, the sound money blog of the 21st century, in which I write daily of my vision of the future of money, in which gold plays an increasingly passive role and Bitcoin an increasingly dominant role at the center of the monetary universe. Try my free 7-day trial membership and contact me anytime at ahoffman@CryptoGoldCentral.com to ask about the blog or arrange cryptocurrency and or precious metal related consultations. In my one-on-one podcast series, I seek to learn of and share the viewpoints of the Bitcoin community's top thought leaders and entrepreneurs. All episodes, including this, the 15th, can be found at CryptoGoldCentral.com, on my Twitter page at Andy_Hoffman_CG, and the World Crypto Network's iTunes feed. This week, Francis Pouliot has returned, having first appeared 6 weeks ago when the Bitcoin price was $7,000, SegWit 2X had just been defeated, and Bcash was about to mount its final miserably failed attempt to usurp it. Francis, whose extremely popular Twitter handle is @FrancisPouliot, is one of the Bitcoin community's most visible communicators, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs. To wit, not only is he the head of research at Bitcoin blockchain consultancy Cadillacsy.com, but the CEO of Bills.com, spelled BYLLS, an online Bitcoin payment service. To that end, welcome, Francis, to One-on-One.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Yes, it's a pleasure, and thanks on your vacation for calling in from halfway around the world for this very important call, the first of the 15 one-on-ones I've had during any kind of period of stress for the crypto environment. And so anyway, we're going to start by first addressing the important topics of the day, starting, of course, with the latest and most scandalous yet Bcash pump. However, the principal reason I asked Francis back is to elaborate on the multitude of ways cryptocurrency investors and potential investors can benefit from service companies like Francis's at a time when vital services like consulting, brokerage, and technical troubleshooting are both short in supply and difficult to locate. That said, I definitely want to start with the top story of the day in this crazy crypto world, which seemingly advances financially, politically, and technologically at a double dog years pace, which lately seems closer to triple dog years. To that end, consider that when I last had Francis on the show, Bitcoin holders were basking in the glow of the SegWit 2X cancellation. One day later, the second great Bcash pump commenced, pushing Bitcoin all the way down to 5,500, whilst Bcash pumped to 2,400. A third but less formidable pump occurred Thanksgiving week, which after failing miserably, like the first two attempts, yielded an all-time high Bitcoin price of $20,000 4 days ago, and a Bcash to Bitcoin ratio of 0.08. Lo and behold, Bcash attacked again just 2 days later, coincident with a massive pump in all altcoins, the likes of which we haven't seen since the ICO explosion 6 months ago. Even now, it's hard to discern how much of Bcash's pump is due to the altcoin renaissance. However, particularly in light of the vile, unscrupulous collusion we witnessed Tuesday night between Bcash, Coinbase, and CNBC, there's unquestionably an orchestrated attempt to attack Bitcoin by the most evil, destructive person in the crypto community, Roger Ver. To that end, Francis, I'd like to start this topic with your views about what Ver actually expects to accomplish in a move that is now causing both Bitcoin and Bcash to decline, and how successful, or should I say unsuccessful, you think he will be.
Right. Well, I mean, definitely right in the topic of it, right in the thick of it. About 2 days ago, I think it was around 1 p.m. Milan time, I saw the news happen, and I tried to go to bed. And obviously, I failed miserably. Spent the following 5 hours online trying to understand what had just happened. And so let's kind of put everything in context, right? So the context is that Coinbase had been holding on to people's Bcash tokens for quite some time, having not released them. Another context is that Coinbase has been not releasing SegWit for quite some time, or not integrating it. They've, of course, been blaming all the problems of Bitcoin on the Bitcoin protocol developers, and there had been increasing calls from the community to kind of get them to adopt SegWit, which would immediately alleviate the fees for their users, but also by bringing down the average, their fees, they would bring down the average fees on the network. So as soon as they announced Bcash, my first initial gut reaction after the first 5 seconds of seeing that was like, that's kind of a slap in the face to not do that, to not do SegWit before that, because for the simple reason being that while Bitcoin is suffering from all those transaction fees, they would in effect not be relieving those transaction fees for everyone and their users, but increasing those transaction fees for everyone for their own gain. Which I'm not necessarily against a company doing that for seeking profits, but that was kind of like my initial gut reaction. I tried to go to bed, and then I realized that there had been a difficulty retarget period about 2 days before, where the difficulty of Bitcoin mining increased by 13%, and that kind of kept me awake. Went back to look at the charts, and when the mining had started already to pour out of Bitcoin onto Bcash, and obviously this being fueled by the price of Bcash on the exchanges going up, and all sorts of mining software will, for example, look at the price of different cryptos and start mining different cryptos depending on the price. So immediately I looked at the difficulty retarget estimations, and I saw that if this under those conditions of yesterday, basically we would have a difficulty retarget after January. What that means is that during that whole period, if miners abandon Bitcoin and there's less hashing power, the transactions would be much slower, the fees would be much higher. And since this is right at the beginning of that 2-week period where the difficulty adjusts, that's probably the worst timing possible in terms of difficulty adjustment. I thought that was really suspicious timing, especially since it took me about 20 minutes of just thinking about that and realizing that it was absolutely the worst timing possible for the mining conditions. So clearly, this was either really stupid or negligent, or just outright clearly malicious. There was a lot of things that were also weird. For example, this was timed with Jihan releasing a batch of miners accepting Bcash only. This was timed with obviously the highest Bitcoin price of all time. The highest Bitcoin price of all time also means that the transaction fees, as denominated in US dollars, are the highest they've ever been. The average Satoshi per byte is rising, but the average USD per transaction, because the price is so high, has risen extremely. The mempool is congested. Really weird kind of announcement at the last minute, also not giving anyone any headway. I'm not even talking about the insider trading possibilities there, but just kind of dropping those news on everyone like that, especially as the entire as the another context is there's the futures markets that just came out. They obviously are one of the 4 exchanges that are considered in the CME or GDAX, probably one of the 4 exchanges that are considered in the CME price, clearly allowing their users like that to quote unquote sell their Bcash would have severely affected the futures price in this way. There's also the fact that there's all sorts of things that are going on, right? So they kind of, I haven't I don't really trade on GDAX that much, so I don't really know what happened, but apparently there was some kind of trades that were canceled. They announced that you could buy, sell, and trade Bcash, but you could actually just buy Bcash, you can sell Bcash, and then when the price became too volatile, they shut it down. So what that led is kind of this really artificially high pumped price. What's really weird is that's and I actually did a poll on Twitter, and it's like it's the worst timing possible, and it's really suspicious. And after that happened, obviously there was a big kind of collusion, and it's pretty clear that this is being used to feed some kind of news cycle, right? To put some kind of narrative spin on the news cycle. So transaction fees of Bitcoin going up, everybody getting into Bitcoin, all those personalities saying that Bitcoin is dead, that Bitcoin Cash is now the real Bitcoin, and very, very suspicious stuff. There was some connection established between Roger Ver's, one of Roger Ver's, I guess, supporters, or I'll just use that as a word, and
the head of the Bitcoin Cash Fund, that would qualify like as a #1 henchman.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So definitely someone that's high up in the chain there. So really just a lot of like really terrible coincidence, bad timing, or maliciously or planned bad timing to maximize the disruptive effect on Bitcoin. So again, I don't really have anything against Coinbase listing Bcash. I mean, obviously they're gonna do it, but the way they did it, I think, was really bad for the community. If you look at how it looks in the Coinbase app, I don't think they should have listed Bcash like that. I think they probably should have let people cash out, or at least kind of put it as an expert option or something like that. But like right now, you have Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Ethereum in the app. It's literally the logos are just like that, it's purposely confusing for the users. And to get to your point, like what is Roger getting hoping to get out of that? The more I think about it, the more this whole thing is much more sophisticated than I initially thought. And either I'm a little bit paranoid, but it really seems to me like there's a lot of things that make sense retroactively. For instance, a lot of the Bitcoin like Bcash supporters had been texting me before Segwit2x got canceled, saying like something big's gonna happen in Bitcoin Cash, Segwit2x getting abandoned, that's good for Bitcoin Cash. And I was like, yeah, you're right, I guess it's good for Bitcoin Cash. So maybe the Segwit2x cancellation wasn't the tactical retreat that I thought it was, and maybe it was part of the plan all along, right? To make us look like super intolerant and it's the only option and core stalling progress. I did my master's thesis, by the way, on narrative framing surrounding the war on drugs. So when you talk about like twisting definitions and alternative facts and stuff like that, that's my playground. I see it everywhere, and I just can't believe that Roger Ver is that smart. So for all the viewers out there that are familiar with like Mr. Robot, in Mr. Robot, there's always the usual suspect, right? But White Rose is the secret one
Right.
actually pulling all the strings. And I just can't believe that Roger Ver would be White Rose, right? Roger Ver is kind of the fall guy,
Yes. Is he White Rose? Is he White Rose, or is he the head of E Corp? Well,
Yeah.
look, there's a couple of things that you brought up here. One, of course, the coincidence. I mean, we don't need to use the word coincidence. These are obviously coordinated attacks. There's as much proof as you need. The first one, of course, as we said, came right at the all-time high last time, within a day or two. The same kind of thing, the difficulty adjustments, the exact same tactics, the mempool spamming, all at once. And at some point you wonder who's this is actually buying. I mean, it can't just be this one man selling all his Bitcoin to buy Bcash because he has to get supporters. And as everyone knows, you see the quote supporters, they're almost like zombies on Twitter. They're the opposite of the people on the Bitcoin network. They're just constantly just not just negative, but maliciously negative. And we know about the birds. So there's clearly a lot of, there's a fund out there, as Tone was saying. They have a war chest to use on this kind of thing, and they do. And it's almost like Roger Ver is, is he been solicited by these bad actors? It's almost like with the gold cartel. Like every bad person from within the Bitcoin community and outside the Bitcoin community seems to, be his partners, whereas all the good people, the normal people, are on the side of Bitcoin. But the bigger question is, and then we want to talk about Coinbase. I mean, that is a complete disaster. And when you see how well the platforms and the non-politics of sites like Bitflyer are, you realize that Coinbase's days as the dominant player are numbered anyway, let alone after what they've just done here. But the big question is, from what all you're saying is, and I agree completely, that Roger Ver is just an entrepreneur. He's no White Rose. Can these two coins coexist? I mean, can you just go on forever where the smaller one has the ability to cause so much havoc on the network?
Andy?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Can you just repeat the last end of the question?
Yes. The last question was, can these two coins coexist? I mean, how could we have a situation where this little Bcash, which doesn't really get used for anything except speculation, is actually able to cause such damage in the near term, at least, to the network? Can the two coins coexist?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that they can coexist because they're coexisting right now, and I don't think that either of them are going to go away. That's kind of the irreversibility of what they've done, for example, of splitting Bitcoin or splitting the Bitcoin brand or attempting to Bitcoin brand, that's something that's irreversible, in the sense that even if, for example, Bitcoin the Bitcoin community would adopt an 8 megabyte block size, there would be no merging back the two, and they would obviously not abandon their Bcash holdings and go and capitulate and go back into Bitcoin, whatever they say. So I think this is something that's permanent, and this is something that we're trying to avoid. This is specifically what we were all trying to avoid, to have this horrible brand dilution and confusion and disruption of the consensus. And I call these people the consensus breakers, breaking consensus and breaking the network effect. So the bigger question is, you know, how is that going to affect the long-term viability of Bitcoin when, you know, there's in theory and practice, you know, a lot of people are kind of happy about that. They're saying, oh, it's going to prove Bitcoin's anti-fragility, and it's a movement of weak hands, and, you know, this is good for Bitcoin long-term, you know, trademark. So everything's always good for Bitcoin because of anti-fragility. We kind of expect Bitcoin to grow out of that. But the other side to the coin is, like, I really generally am getting spammed in my inbox by all sorts of people that are asking about Bcash. I see it almost like as a spam attack, because everybody at Christmas, you know, you thought Thanksgiving you were getting quizzed about Bitcoin. Imagine at Christmas, you know, all your relatives are going to ask you about Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. You know, is it true that Bitcoin Cash is na? So we're definitely stuck with this fact, and it's definitely spam. You know, social spam, economic spam, network spam. It's kind of a denial of service attack. You know, everything about it is Bitcoin Cash's ultimate goal was to be Bitcoin, was to claim to be Bitcoin. It's not like an altcoin. Their specific objective is to destroy Bitcoin. There is no other way. They want Bitcoin, the legacy chain that they call it, to disappear so that all that value flows into their chain. That's the exit goal of their Ponzi, essentially. So we're gonna coexist. I'm just really disappointed. Like, you know, when we talk about Coinbase, I'm just super disappointed. Like, they have the opportunity to take the lead on this and to really say, this is absolutely nonsense. We can't confuse our users in this way. We can't just list Bitcoin Cash like that, you know, just like accepting the fact that the people that are promoting it at the same time are being extremely fraudulent, and they're specifically claiming, and, you know, all the eyes of the world. I don't know. I think Coinbase really dropped the ball on that. I agree with you that they need to go. And just so everyone's clear, there's nobody is going to make Coinbase go away other than Bitcoin users that are just boycotting them and not giving them money and not recommending them. Nobody's going to come save Bitcoin and drop magically a new exchange onto all of us that's exactly doing what we want. I mean, right. That's kind of our role right now. So,
well, like, you know, I mean, but Coinbase is just one player. Look, you know, like Adam Meister says, the 20% and the 80%. It's unfortunate that someone in a position to really be one of the top 1% turns out to be just another 80%, making short-term decisions for unknown motivations, possibly for insider trading profits. I can't even imagine how much money was made between what happened the other day by knowing what they were going to do. But aside from that, look, Coinbase is not going to go away because of boycotting. They're going to go away because they're just not a good exchange. I mean, when you see how some of the other exchanges work, how much more efficient they are, not to mention that, you know, one like Bitflyer, they don't have politics. You just buy and sell Bitcoin, and they if everyone does SegWit, they do SegWit. I mean, that's how the network works. And it's not just them. We were talking about all these decentralized networks, like on the World Crypto Network. They're all coming. We're going to talk about that later. All these technologies, which are going to make, by the way, all the slowing down of the network moot in a few years when we have the Lightning Network and all these things, and we'll get to all that. But the fact is, you know, the way I look at it, you know, what we had feared, I mean, what we had really feared going into the reason why the price was under $1,000 for so long, and even into the summer, was under 2,000, was because people thought that we'd have an actual split where Bitcoin's immutability would be doubted. That's not what we're dealing with right now. What we're dealing with right now is just kind of a rogue spin-off, which is just wreaking havoc. I'm trying to think of an analogy in the real world.
But we know that, right? So we know
Yeah.
that, but the general public doesn't know that, because one
Mhm.
thing is that to have this holistic understanding of Bitcoin forks is to also have a really good understanding of Bitcoin consensus, which
Yes.
implies some understanding of the economics and the technology. So you know, that's the reason why I've been on Twitter like all this time. Like, you're kind of ruining my life, basically. It's kind of trying to reply to every single comment that, you know, like Eli from Bitcoin Cash is doing, is because they are putting this notion that there's Bitcoin Core, there's Bitcoin Cash, everybody can make up his own Bitcoin, everything's just the same. You know, we have just as good as a claim as these guys to be Bitcoin. It's just a question of opinion, man. You know, and they're kind of pushing this narrative, and like new users are pouring into Bitcoin. And you know, we don't see on Twitter these guys that are, because they're looking at the sidelines. They're in Facebook groups, they're in LinkedIn groups, they're in Bitcoin meetups, and like, I guarantee you that a lot of people are getting into Bitcoin Cash. They're absolutely getting into Bitcoin Cash right now. So even though we know it's a fake spinoff, it's basically a counterfeit, it's fraud.
Right.
It's not something that's really easy to grasp for the average user. And you know, what's kind of frustrating is not, I'm not worried about my own Bcash, right? I'm not salty at Bitcoin Cash splitting off. What I'm really pissed off about is, like, we've been promoting Bitcoin for a really, really long time. And I kind of, and so has Roger, so has those guys, right? And I kind of feel like now it's kind of on us, right? So we promoted Bitcoin, people are coming in, and they're getting, you know, there's these charlatans, these non-technical charlatans that are kind of grabbing all that momentum we created and taking it away from
Right.
us to get their own exit because they didn't get their way. And you know,
Right.
it's just absolutely frustrating, to
Right.
be
But
honest.
but you need to put things into context. And my experience, not just in age but in career, will tell you that I've spent 15 years in precious metals. So when you say they're ruining your life, well, yeah, I guess
Right.
I say those words out loud often when I think of how much I have to deal with Bcash, and before
Mhm.
that, Bitcoin Unlimited and Segwit 2x, and really just everything that has to do with this one guy. But I mean, I've been saying this 15 years with precious metals, and they really did ruin my life.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I escaped unscathed, but I never won that. That was a war that was
Yeah.
ultimately lost, and it won't be won unless there's a major crisis. And of course, if there's a major crisis, everyone loses. And by the way, Bitcoin will be the biggest
Mhm.
winner of all.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm not looking for a big crisis. But yes, there's a lot of people asking about Bcash, but not so much to me. And I think it's more people just ask about anything that's going up in price. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about, you know, they're stealing our momentum, but 4 days ago, 4 days
Mhm.
ago, we were at $20,000.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not like they took the momentum of 9 years in 4 days simply because of a
Mhm.
run-of-the-mill Bcash attack. And even and when you look at it in the big picture of
Mhm.
numbers, you know, we're at about 0.18 Bitcoin. Well, they got much higher last time. And the sector is, I know everyone wants to believe it'll go up to infinity. It has to correct at some point. This has been the most amazing rally of anything I've ever seen, including the dot-coms, and we're just in the early stages. So why don't we
Yeah.
just end the Bcash for now? I think we've really
Sure.
put out
Sure.
some very differing opinions, and I want to get to some other things. But the next thing is going to be the altcoins. I have it written down right here. As I said, they have truly been amidst a meteoric rise, which cumulatively has taken Bitcoin's, fraudulently understated, dominance from 55% to 45% in 4 days. And that's despite Bitcoin trading at 16,000 or so. First
Mhm.
Litecoin, then Ethereum, and now everything except for the last hour or two is in massive melt-up mode, unlike any time we've seen before. Now tell me, is this simply the wall of institutional money diversifying its portfolio, or small investors looking for cheaper assets than Bitcoin, or something else that I'm missing?
I think it's definitely a combination of many factors. So the institutional money are, to my experience, kind of obsessed with diversifying with altcoins to a fault, in the sense that there's no problem with diversification generally, but they diversify in altcoins just for the sake of their diversification, because that's kind of their usual fallback. They think that they're hedging against Bitcoin by getting altcoins, where they should be thinking about you get into altcoins when Bitcoin is not aggressive of a return enough for you, and you want some more aggressive returns, right? So altcoin traders are the most aggressive traders in the world. So it's definitely not a a good diversification strategy. However, that's kind of what we're seeing happening. A lot of the time, it's difficult to tell people, like, the idea that Bitcoin maximalism is cultish and it's stubborn is really prevalent, and I understand why. It's kind of it's because it's usually so long and arduous to explain why we should only be focused on one of these major assets. Not saying that we shouldn't speculate or anything like that, right? It's perfectly fair, but when you look at the fundamentals, it's so long and arduous that instinctively people just say, they're all shit coins. This is kind of a really fast shortcut for explaining the fundamentals and network effects, and the fact that the very nature of money is to go over the coincidence of wants and to have something fungible and universal. So having coins for every merchant, that's going against these are the kind of discussions that you don't have in like that 2 minutes when someone asks you about altcoins and you just say they're all just shit, right? That's usually the answer. But really, so the institutional money really wants to diversify, and it's kind of hard to explain to them why that may not be the best idea. But I mean, that's been true for a long time. I mean, certainly since the big Ethereum pump, and starting from April and May, the institutional money that was talking about doing Bitcoin ETFs, they started to talk about these multi-coin ETFs, and there's never been a shortage of people that are trying to offer these financial products, which give them exposure to a lot of different cryptocurrencies. So the recent rise in altcoins, I mean, when you look at CoinMarketCap and you look at those charts, they really don't give you that much of an idea of what's going on. They usually more reflect kind of the day trading activity, because you have no real idea of the depth of those markets and the liquidity in those markets. When Bitcoin being attacked like that by Bcash and that becoming the dominant item in the news cycle, is definitely not bullish for Bitcoin. So it's much easier for people to obviously people are exiting Bitcoin, and they're not going to go into Tether, right? So a lot of the good traders, they know not to go into Tether or any kind of fiat. People don't necessarily want to let that sit on an exchange. They don't necessarily want to sell the Bitcoin and withdraw to their bank account, because they don't want that to touch their bank account, and they don't want to wait 2 weeks to have access to that money. So it's a really easy trade to go into altcoins, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that whenever Bitcoin goes bad, people quote unquote leave Bitcoin for the alts, which is always the narrative. So even if that's not the case, people believe that other people will believe that that's the case, and that kind of that's just trading on the news narrative and that kind of stuff. Looking at fundamentals, it's kind of hard, right? Ethereum's fundamentals are not really, the prospects aren't really increasing that much, so I'm not really worried about that. Ethereum's always just been where a lot of people, Ethereum and Litecoin have always kind of just been where people who have Bitcoins will instinctively dump to, because I think these are the two bags that we're kind of the least afraid to be holding for a short while. Whereas all the other altcoins, I mean, it might just be day traders, and it doesn't take much to pump the altcoins. I mean, we all know about the pump groups, and it's not that difficult to start a particular pump on one of the particular coins, and then once you get everybody excited about the possibility of pumps, those kind of pumps are exponentially faster. Imagine, like, when you're a trader, you see like 6 or 7 coins that are pumping super hard, and then you see the 8th or 9th coin that are just starting to pump. Okay, of course it's going to go as much as the other coins. So there's all this weird kind of psychology going on there, but I'm not sure it's any more significant than any other time.
Right. It's like I was listening to Adam Meister today, and he brought a tweet, and he was talking about that some person did, I don't know the person, about how, particularly like what you just saw this week, not like we didn't know this beforehand, but particularly what we saw with Bcash and Coinbase and CNBC. I mean, we're talking about blatant, like Martha Stewart is blushing, and what's the guy's name from Drexel? Ivan Boesky. I mean, you realize, wow, this is completely unregulated, and there's a lot of money that can push around these things, and we can, like you said, just absolutely move markets on a dime, and there's so many of them to move. And now, you're saying, well, people used to go into Ethereum and Litecoin, well, because they were the most liquid. which is pretty sad because, I mean, they were really small, but they were the most liquid. So you can't go into a tiny, tiny thing. You have to go somewhere where you can actually sell a position. And but now with the institutional wall of money that has rushed in, a lot of it is front running the thousands of crypto hedge funds that are going to start next week on January 1st. There's a lot of liquid things that weren't even, things like Litecoin have become massively liquid. Ethereum is one of the biggest tech companies in the world in that right now, even though it's not a company. And then a whole bunch of these ICO microcap types are plenty liquid. You can definitely buy and sell a position in size in them. So you have that going on. And of course, you have the thing with going on with Bcash. But people haven't even realized, especially this dominance index is so understated. Not just forget, it's always been understated by the fact that these market caps like Ripples and old pre-mines are just ridiculously, almost fraudulently overstated. I mean, to say that something was pre-mined would be like saying a stock has authorized shares, so we're going to count them like they're fully diluted when they're not even in the money and there's no intention. But aside from that, we have just added to the coin market cap table. Like I think 5 of the top 10 weren't even there. So if you go back to the May, when you had the time, the ICO pump just before it, and Bitcoin's
what the heck
trading.
Is Cardano?
Yeah.
What the heck is Cardano?
You have Cardano.
I just saw that. It's like $10 billion.
Yes.
What is that thing?
So back in May, there was no Bcash, there was no Cardano, there was no IOTA, there was no B Gold, and pretty soon there's going to be B Diamond, which is going to be up in there too. So the point is, everyone's going, well, Bitcoin is back to where it was at the time. No, I mean, it not only is it always understated, but you've thrown in a whole bunch of other stuff that wasn't even there. So I mean, when Bitcoin had its big move in the last 2 months, going from, I don't know, 5,000 to 20,000, it massively outperformed everything. I mean, Bcash was at 0.05 Bitcoin, Litecoin was at 0.005 Bitcoin, Ethereum got to a low just the other day of 0.03. So a lot of what's going on is them simply catching up to where they were. And a few have gone up a little, but like even Ethereum at like what, 4 or 4.5%. I mean, that thing was at 15% at its high. So a lot of it's catch up. A lot of it is there's a lot of liquidity now moving in and out of the sector. But as for use cases, we'll end the segment on this. And I've always thought, I mean, there's no way Bitcoin could be everything. To think that it's going to be gold and it's going to be so high that people can own Satoshis and do all the world's trade in it. No, I do think some of these altcoins have uses. I don't know how many of them. I mean, do you believe some of these are going to be long-term winners, or that none could be long-term winners?
Yeah, I think a lot of the altcoins have all sorts of interesting uses. I think where they have very little chance of succeeding is the use case of being the monetary unit, right, of the future's decentralized financial and monetary system. But that's kind of one tiny use case amongst many. I don't, most of these the altcoins that do have some legitimate kind of utility. For example, Ethereum. I cannot speak to the use case of the world computer because I cannot myself be an analyst of Ethereum and say that it is fulfilling this function and this function is actually useful. However, a lot of people are telling me as technical experts that that promise is that utility is not exactly what Ethereum does, and Ethereum is doing something much less. So I don't know. I mean, one thing is for certain is that these altcoins are very good. They've always been good for Bitcoin because Bitcoin is extremely conservative, and you can't really have this really fast-paced innovation in Bitcoin like you can in all the other blockchains. And what's important in the scientific process is not doing hypotheses and being always right. It's doing hypotheses and proving them wrong and telling everyone else that that's wrong. So that's one less thing that you need to try and do. So I don't know. If that's that's a good way to put it, but like these are kind of live testnets. Like that's Litecoin's only function essentially. I mean, Litecoin was kind of designed to serve as a test net for Bitcoin, as a place of innovation for things that could get into Bitcoin, as a niche. It has acquired this kind of unique kind of Dogecoin like Litecoin is basically the new Dogecoin, but if Dogecoin was technically very good and actually useful for Bitcoin to innovate, there's like this sense of community. So in terms of like a lot of these and people really to understand, like those currencies, they're not like browsers, right? They can be like browsers in the sense that you can use a blockchain platform to achieve some use case. In the case of Ethereum, for example, there are actually some niche use cases that are better done with Bitcoin right now. Mostly simply because of the transaction fees, to be quite honest, because most of the smart contracts that you're doing on Ethereum can either be done on a web application without a blockchain, or can be done with Bitcoin scripting language.
Let me
yeah.
there, because there's two things. I mean, I wanted to actually ask about the technology next, but you brought up Litecoin, and I'm debating only in the space of time, but I'm going to ask this because there's a lot of people that view Litecoin as the silver to Bitcoin's gold. So I have this written up, so I'm going to ask it now. Basically, I want to hear your views of Charlie Lee sold all his Litecoin, and in my view, he's one of the great pioneers of the community, and I see no issue with him selling his Litecoin, which he worked tremendously hard to develop, given how much wealth he's accumulated. However, the bigger story is what it means to Bitcoin, given that he has made it clear that he holds Bitcoin a lot more than he ever had Litecoin. I think it's the biggest endorsement for Bitcoin I can imagine, outside of maybe like Jamie Dimon endorsing it. What do you? How do you view Litecoin in the scope of him selling?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because a lot of people that are not familiar with the community might think that Litecoin, being Bitcoin's biggest competitor, the communities are kind of at war, like a little bit like Ethereum or Bcash. But I really don't see it like that. I think following Charlie's work for a long time, it's kind of always been clear to me that he's a Bitcoiner at heart, and Litecoin has its own community, and he's kind of also custodian of the community, and as a lot of people have put their faith and their investment in Litecoin. But I mean, in my mind, if him working on Litecoin was a way for him to work on Bitcoin at the same time, and he made himself extremely relevant and a positive influence into the Bitcoin industry by being the father of Litecoin. So I mean, for people that don't know that, of course, it's going to be a signal. But for me, nothing's changed, right? I always knew, and a lot of people always knew, that he was a huge supporter of Bitcoin, and that pretty much, the best thing that can happen to Litecoin is that Litecoin's features get introduced into Bitcoin, and in this sense, Litecoin proves its relevance over time by having the features actually get introduced into Bitcoin, just like it did with segregated witness, which is the main reason why it went up in price. But as to the incentive, I don't agree with his logic at all, that selling the coin is a good idea to rid yourself of conflict of interest. If that is actually the reason why he sold his coin, or if he actually sold the coins, I think it's pretty much the opposite, actually. I mean, if he wanted to remove conflict of interest, what I would have done in his position is I would have blocked the Litecoins kind of for 5 years. You can do that with a time-locked transaction. I think what he wanted to avoid is the appearance of because his tweets will move markets. He's like the Trump of crypto, right? So if he tweets something about a crypto, it will go up. The last time he tweeted once about Decred, and I immediately went and looked at it and bought some of it as an investment. Not it's saying that Charlie's the one who made me do that, but people do take his tweets as investment advice.
But Decred is one thing, and Litecoin's another thing. Decred is a small altcoin, and even so much, he has tweets that are influential. I don't view him anything like some of the guys like, say, George Gilder in the internet stock age, where you say something and things move. And and Charlie doesn't tend to talk about that stuff much anyway. I think it's kind of, I think that is kind of silly. It's a big decentralized platform. It's much bigger. It's $12-15 billion now. He can't move it. And frankly, in all the years that SegWit's been around, there's only been one quote announcement they've ever had that's moved it, and that was getting SegWit. Otherwise,
I think we're not that influential, but the thing is, like I think he's an engineer as well, and seeing the heat on kind of insider trading, that kind of stuff, I think he saw it as a positive thing for everyone to increase kind of the trust in the process. But I would suggest that my suggestion that I tweeted out is that, good for you for selling that, but that's not the right way, I think, to keep incentives aligned. I think the Litecoin Foundation should pay Charlie Lee a world-class financial institution CEO salary, the same salary you would pay the head of a central bank, and that salary should be paid in Litecoin, and that salary should be time-locked so that it cannot be claimed for the next 5 years, so that in no way, shape, or form can he, manipulate the market and sell those Litecoins. I think,
But that
even
makes
though
it,
he's
but that makes it a centralized coin. That's exactly the thing that I have no interest in. I don't care how much I like him. Not to mention something can happen to him, or he can be influenced
sure.
by others like Roger Ver.
Sure, but there is a Litecoin Foundation, and it
Yeah.
does have money, right? So the Litecoin Foundation exists, and it does have money, and it can pay a salary. And if he sells his Litecoin, what's his incentive to keep working on Litecoin? I mean, obviously, it's his baby, so there's like this clear emotional and ideological attachment to it. But if we're speaking strictly of incentives, I mean, there's nothing wrong with Litecoin Foundation paying him, because the reality is that that wouldn't centralize Litecoin more, because Litecoin is already kind of centralized around Charlie Lee, because the development team is indeed like much smaller, and he's kind of he's more kind of like a Vitalik type of figure in the Litecoin community, where the informal scientific, all those cryptos are really decentralized in terms of development, because anybody commits, but the kind of informal scientific committee that will steer the vision of the crypto. In Bitcoin, it's much larger. There's probably like 30, 50 people that are kind of in this informal steering committee, whereas which is the Bitcoin core process. In Litecoin, there's kind of Charlie, and I'm sure there are others, but the fact that I don't know them is pretty telling. So yeah. Charlie Lee, please consider getting a little bit more Litecoin, and I don't think anybody believes that you have any conflict of interest with Litecoin. So if that giving the impression that you're crooked or anything like that, that was what you're trying to prevent, you don't need to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
your tweets and your actions already speak for themselves before selling the coins.
Well, I think you made all the good points right there. Again, I have nothing against Litecoin. It's the only altcoin I have any of, and I have very little. I recently sold it for Bitcoin, but it's good. I like it. I like him. I like what it represents. It's a perfect example, unlike Bcash, of a coin that's just trying to develop, and it did develop. It developed from nothing to $15 billion without harming anyone, simply putting your nose to the ground and doing good work and building a network. But the fact is, what you're saying now, it is very centralized, and that central leader, it's questionable what his motives are, if he's even there anymore. Frankly, I think it's because he's more interested in Bitcoin. He's probably got a whole haul of Litecoins. Like, I don't feel like spending all my time dealing with this. I'll spend my time more with Bitcoin and other personal endeavors, what they are. But again, it's inconsequential to me that he sold. I mean, he could do whatever he wants. The Litecoin stands on its own. But what does worry me is the kind of things you're talking about, that there's a Litecoin Foundation that needs to pay him, and now he's gone, and the development team is small. I mean, these are not, this is why Litecoin, it can be a little bit of Bitcoin's silver, but it's 1% for a reason, and not 20%. So anyway, let's move on. I was going to first talk about the technologies, like the Lightning Network. I'm not going to go. That's for another call. The fact is, these are all things that are going to help Bitcoin get faster, no matter what Roger Ver tries to do to slow down the network. Oh, wait, I think we just lost Francis for a second. He is overseas. Let's see. What do I do? Do I wait for him and hope? Because here's what I want to talk about. And when he gets back, hopefully we could finish. At Crypto Gold Central, I get an enormous amount of questions, which I do consulting for, about simple things like storing cryptocurrency, like how do you buy cryptocurrency, and a few questions about how do you sell, although very few people are doing. And the point is, there's very few people who can help, especially when issues arise. Now, I can help with very simple issues, but I'm a layman. Francis's firm and others like him, which are very difficult to locate, can help you. One of them in particular has to do with issues with wallets. I've had numerous people call me with dire issues about wallets, which are typically resolved in some way, shape, or form. But it's very scary when your Trezor or Nano has an issue and you don't know how to do it. Another issue has to do with paper wallets. And I hope Francis comes back, because at the moment he's talking to several people that I'm aware of who have old paper wallets which are not compatible with, say, new. He's back. So Francis.
Oh, hi Andy.
All good.
Sorry, I dropped out.
No,
I'm
it's all
back.
good. It's all good. I was like, no, he can't be going out at this time, because I was about to ask. I just gave a preview of what you're going to be talking about. I said, I at Crypto
Sure.
Gold Central have so many people calling me and emailing me, asking about often simple things like how to store crypto, but usually, but often you get issues too, and you are aware because I've been sending some of these people to you. Tell us when you have an issue with like a paper wallet or a wallet or a hardware wallet that doesn't work. What are the kind of options that you have for getting these issues resolved?
Yeah, so it's a great point. I mean, one thing that's really understated is that Bitcoin is really hard to use. It's always been super difficult to use, and it's still really hard to use. I think people don't realize how few tools are available for new users, and the level of information required to kind of troubleshoot yourself is so high. That a lot of the users, they really feel like they're kind of abandoned because there's no customer support they can call. The wallets certainly don't offer, like some of them do, but they don't offer phone support and that kind of stuff. So yeah, a real explosion in those kind of requests. So the main things that we'll often get is everything that has to do with recovery of keys, with backups, and with lost wallets. So I've never myself been solicited in a case where funds had been hacked or on a wallet or anything of that nature. Every single lost fund that I've ever had was recovery or lost phone or lost password or something like that.
Or minor malfunctions at time. I had the other day.
Yeah.
The unit, it froze in the middle of a firmware update, forced me to restart with a new password and recovery seed. And then I had to put in my old recovery seed, like these kind of things.
Yeah, and that can be really scary because, for example, and there's a lot of scary things also that shouldn't be scary. For example, you typing the wrong password in your Trezor, and it opens up and you see zero money. It doesn't say wrong passphrase. It just says you have zero money in this passphrase. People don't get that the passphrase of the Trezor is the 25th word of their mnemonic, so it's not really a passphrase. It's just a new kind of it's a new wallet entirely. So it's always focusing around the recovery process, the keys, and just making sure that when you're set up, you're set up properly. That's one of the main things that I see happening. A lot of the times, also, a lot of the issues have to do with buying Bitcoin and selling Bitcoin is also not easy. It's also pretty hard. There's not a lot of.
We're going to get to that next. I want to get to the buying. Stay with the issues first.
Yeah, sure. So most of the issues, so it's usually recovery or some malfunction with the wallet. And in that case, I always recommend just go see a Bitcoiner that knows what he's talking about. First of all, the learning curve that you need to get through to even be able to troubleshoot using articles online is like really high. People that use Bitcoin on a day-to-day basis have dealt with those issues before. So for me, the in-person consulting with someone that knows how to use a wallet is always the best solution. And ideally, the goal is to for people, as I always say, if you're already good with Bitcoin wallets, stop giving free advice and start giving this advice, because you may not think that what you're telling to someone, for example, let's say that you have a backup phrase and someone may be freaking out, and they can just call you and say, did I lose all my money? It's like, did you do this? No, you didn't lose all your money. Here's what we're gonna do. Take a deep breath. That's for you may think that giving this really simple advice is not worth a lot, but to them it might be the difference between thinking they've lost $5 million and thinking that Bitcoin is the greatest thing in the world.
Oh, trust me, I'm well aware that small fees can go a long way, and people are willing to pay them, as they should, to learn. I mean, just setting up a Trezor, which I do for multiple people. I had someone do it for me. It is a terrifying process to do a first transaction Someone
Yeah,
has
yeah.
to help you do it, and then you do it and you go, oh, I see. But that's nothing compared to it actually not working. And before I get to you're going to finish your point here, but I wanted one particular topic that about wallets that I want you to address is paper wallets, because I have now, again, I've been in business 3 or 4 months. I've had 4 or 5 different issues with people calling me. I have this paper wallet. I don't know how to make it work. I have an older paper wallet. I don't know how to make it work. I don't know. I don't trust blockchain.info, Electrum, Mycelium. I mean, if you have a paper wallet, and yes, of course, you can just go to a consultant, but generally speaking, how does this work with, for the average person getting paper wallet onto a online or offline wallet?
Right. So let's talk about like what a paper wallet is by definition. So a paper wallet. So when you think about Bitcoin wallets, you need to stop thinking about the word wallet or the idea of a wallet, and more think about the idea of a keychain, in the sense that the wallet is a software which does 2 things. It's a key maker. It will make the keys, which are the what you need to be able to own Bitcoin, and it will also manage the keys and use your keys to sign Bitcoin transactions and move funds from one place to another. So a paper wallet is essentially just the key that's been generated, usually offline, and you generate a key on kind of a secure. The idea is to generate on a secure computer, which is never connected to the internet. And when you have a key, you can send funds to it, but you can't move it, right? So you generated a key with a software which is able to create keys, but it's not necessarily meant to move keys from one place to another. So it's kind of like you've made an account, you've made your Bitcoin account, but you didn't intend to ever use it, so you made it offline. That sounds safe. That sounds pretty safe. However, it is not that easy to generate private keys securely, and you can have a false sense of security. For example, when you generate private keys on a computer, a lot of people will use a website to generate a private key, which is the worst idea possible, because there is no logical or logistical reason why you would ever need to be connected to the internet when you're generating a private key. You should be able to do that completely out of the internet. Even if you download software to generate a private key on your computer, maybe that software is corrupted. Maybe your computer is corrupted. You generate that on a computer, some people will save it in a notepad file before they print it, and they'll forget it. They'll type it in their computer, they'll put it in the clipboard. When they go back on the internet, it's still in their clipboard. So generating the act of generating a key securely itself is pretty difficult. But the thing is, I mean, if you have generated your key securely, back in the day, this was kind of the best way to be assured that you would never be susceptible to malware. With the invention of hardware wallets, paper wallets are no longer needed. Okay, so in the sense that a hardware wallet does 2 things. It's a mini computer. It's not a USB stick on which you save your private keys. The hardware wallet is like a tiny, tiny computer. Think of it like that, and it does math, right? So the hardware wallet will not connect it to the internet, be like a secure enclave where your private key is like generated in this kind of secure enclave, right? And then think of that as that is essentially your paper wallet. And in addition, you can make a backup of your Trezor, which acts exactly as a paper wallet, right? Except the fact that you know for a fact what with a Trezor backup is in essence a paper wallet. But you can know for a fact that it was generated in a safe way because it was generated in the Trezor. So when you're using a Trezor or any hardware wallet for that matter, what you're doing is really clever. So you've generated your key in that little box. You can send money to it, and it's never been connected to the internet. But when you want to spend it, obviously you need access to the internet. So normally, if you have a private key, when you want to spend it, you need to import it in a hardware in a wallet. So obviously, kind of, it wasn't this safe enclave outside of the internet in your computer, and you're taking it out of the safe enclave. And once you import it, it's as safe as all the other Bitcoins that are in the wallet that you imported it. Which is why, as a side note, before I forget, if you are going to do paper wallets and you're going to go that route, you would probably want to do like 50 addresses, 50 different private keys, and put some like, let's say you have 50 Bitcoins, you'll do 50 addresses with 1 Bitcoin each, because every time you spend or import that private key, it's now kind of corrupted.
Well,
so if you
but I don't think people are making them. I think the issue is people have them and they are desperate to get them into the hardware wallets and having trouble. So what is the best way to do this?
So because hardware wallets are built to be super secure, you can never export a private key, or it's extremely difficult to export the private key from a hardware wallet, and you can certainly not import a private key into a hardware wallet, because you don't want to add any kind of crypto or anything to the hardware wallet in case that's used to corrupt it. So the number one thing is to, if you're going to be a serious investor in crypto, and buy a hardware wallet, right? I know it's expensive, but you know, if you're going to be investing less than $1,000 in Bitcoin, you don't think that much about security because you're not that much of a target. Just hold it on your phone, you're fine. If you're going to go over $1,000, or you know, roughly, think of it as your insurance policy, right? So you would pay like 10% for insuring your Bitcoin or whatever. You go to $1,500, just buy a hardware wallet. As for the paper wallets, if you want to get a paper wallet or a cold storage Bitcoin live on the network, you're going to need to download software in order to import it. So there's many ways to do that. I think the best thing to do, first of all, would be to download a wallet on your phone. I would very much suggest doing that on your phone rather than on your computer. Why? Because when's the last time that you downloaded malware on your phone? Probably never. You probably downloaded some legit apps through the App Store and never installed something outside of the App Store or the iTunes Store. And compare that to your browser, where you always download all sorts of crap on your computer and movies and stuff like that. So download the wallet on your phone. And in most wallets, I would recommend, for example, just for Android, the Bitcoin wallet. For iPhone, I would recommend, it's just called Bitcoin Wallet in Android. It's the developer of the wallet is Shilback, Andreas Shilback. So if you Google SCHILBACH, I think, Android Bitcoin Wallet, it should be the top. In iPhone, I would go for Bread Wallet, which is the easiest to use. In the settings, you'll usually see import private key function. And when you import a private key, one of the main common issues is that they're going to be in different formats. So some private keys can be in a certain format, some mnemonics can be in one format, and the wallet that you're using doesn't necessarily recognize that format. So in that case, you need to change the format of the private key. Don't do that yourself. If you sweep a private key and you're experiencing a problem, the number one issue is always just a format issue. And that's not a big deal. That's something that we can easily do. For example, some of the old paper wallets have some form of encryption, which is not used anymore. Some of the old paper wallets may have 17-word mnemonics, 12-word mnemonics, or that are not compatible with new wallets. So that's usually the issue. If you see a private key which starts by 6, which is often what people will have done, it's because it's been encrypted. So you need to decrypt it with your passwords. There's a lot of utilities to do that online and tools. But again, if you were going to decrypt like private keys on your computer, those private keys are as safe as your computer. So in that case, if something goes wrong, even before you start to decrypt it, it's probably better to call one of your Bitcoin buddies or hire a professional. Yeah, that's for the imports. That's pretty much the most common issues.
So basically, you know, to me, what it sounds like, if I have this issue, listening to what you said, obviously there's so much technical stuff. What I would do probably is try this Bitcoin wallet or the Bread wallet on whether you're Samsung or Apple, and if it allows you to do it, great. If not, get help. And and that's my next question, or last question on this topic, or last question is, you know, getting help sounds easy, but it's hard. And the reason I have had your help is only because I'm part of the World Crypto Network, their chat room, which has exposed me to some very smart people. But the average person is I mean, you can Google on the internet. If you Google Bitcoin consultants, Bitcoin technical help, nothing. You'll find absolutely nothing. So when you say find Bitcoiners you can trust, obviously I'm using this to drive business your way, because I know that you can do it. You just proved it to everybody. And also, I'm sure you can probably give some alternate suggestions. So first, tell me how people can contact you about these issues, and also if you can give out any kind of alternatives about where other places are that these kind of things, especially things you may not be like the top expert in, are.
Yeah, so one of the things that you have to be really careful is that a lot of people in Bitcoin are trying to get your Bitcoins, right? They're trying to get your Bitcoins because they know that once they have your Bitcoins, they have a lot of plausible deniability. So when you're getting help, unfortunately, I would love to say that, you know, you can just go on Facebook and solicitate anybody on Facebook. You can. However, in many scenarios, for example, when we're doing a recovery with a client, I will be handling his private key. And, you know, if something disappears, I can say, well, it wasn't me, you know, you did it, or it was something, it had already been hacked or something like that. So understand that when you're getting Bitcoin help, you're not just getting IT help for your iPad. You're literally kind of putting your Bitcoins, in many cases, in the hands of someone which can run away and blame you, and the plausible deniability is huge. So one of the first rules I would say is that if you're getting help from a Bitcoin consultant, don't give your private keys. That's kind of the, don't send them also wallet files. If they're asking for private keys or wallet files before they know anything, like, you got to be really, really careful and really, really trusting. If you're going to send private keys and wallet files to someone, don't do that. Ideally, yeah. So that's kind of the disclaimer first. But I would start off with the first thing you're going to do is, in your city, there are 2 or 3. You know, if you're living close to any major city, there's probably a meetup group that's not too far. If you're not in a major city, you know, obviously that doesn't apply to you. But if you're in a major city, there's probably a meetup group or an Ethereum group. And you know, also consider a lot of people that are also in the altcoins can help you with Bitcoin as well, right? So Bitcoin meetups, Ethereum meetups. Take a stab at going at those meetups and getting some of the guys' business cards. I know that at all the Bitcoin meetups I've ever went to, everybody has a lot of the Bitcoin people that they all have business cards. They're trying to sell Bitcoins to new users to cash out, or they're trying to make a little bit of money consulting. So those kind of physical meetups are definitely a good place to go. The second place to go is also, depending on which jurisdiction you're in and how good your exchange is, try to use the exchange's existing customer support for your Bitcoin support. In some cases, they might actually accept to do that. For example, if you're lucky enough to be a Bills customer and you have a problem with your Electrum, we will help you, because we're trying to get the Bitcoins out of your wallet and into our service to you know, to make some money off of that transaction. So you can also try and do that. So that's where I would start. After that, yeah, I would probably start off there, and also think that if you're using an employee of a Bitcoin company, of an exchange, you're far less likely to get scammed, because they have a lot less plausible deniability, because those communications with you by email are obviously recorded by the bosses. So, you know, put yourself in a situation where you're removing the plausible deniability from the IT person, you know, scamming you. And also, a good idea is just to ask people around to validate this person in your community, right? So a lot of people will claim to be experts, and if you're going to solicitate someone because of a wallet problem, you're not an expert, and you're not going to be able to validate them. So just because someone says they're an expert doesn't mean it. Always remember to kind of get some peer validation. So in terms of services, I mean, it's another really good thing you might want to do, because the real experts at this problem are the people that are selling Bitcoin on a local, on a regular basis, right? So think about local Bitcoin brokers. You know, who did you buy the Bitcoins from? Do you remember who you bought the Bitcoins from? Can you contact the person who you bought the Bitcoins from the first time? Is there a Bitcoin ATM in your area which has a support line on the ATM? A lot of the Bitcoin ATMs need to, because if the Bitcoin ATM kind of breaks in the middle of a transaction, you can usually call a line and talk to the operator. So look for the people that are on a day-to-day basis buying and selling Bitcoin, and try to get a meeting with them. That's the best advice I can get, because as you say, if you look online, you're going to really be disappointed.
Okay, and of course, everyone can email Francis at francis@satoshiportal.com.
Absolutely.
I certainly have, and I think he can be helpful at the least to guide you in the right direction, and in many cases to actually give you help. Now, the
Yeah,
last,
yeah. So
go on. Mhm.
yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah. So my company Catalaxy operates out of Montreal, but I am training actually a few Bitcoin and blockchain analysts. So these are exactly the kind of people that I'm describing. These kind of, for example, one of our employees, Evan Ryer, has been in Bitcoin for a really long time. You know, buying and selling, getting interested. He realized by splitting Bcash for all his friends that he actually knows a hell of a lot more than anybody else in his surrounding, and everybody was always asking him for advice. So we hired him to do crypto consulting, and we're hiring a bunch of more people. And you know, there's no small issue for us. We do deal with large institutional clients, but we hired people specifically to deal with small customers, because we know that these kind of services are never going to go away. It starts with the backup, but for my consulting firm, it ends with, you know, estate planning and taxes and that kind of stuff. So really don't hesitate. You know, the smallest issue is not a problem for us, because we're just waiting for the opportunity to gain your trust with those small issues. So then when the big issues happen, you know, we're already on your Rolodex. So as Andy says, contact Andy or contact me, and we'll both be able to find an expert to help you. Because, you know, I was going to say, other than going to your local meetup, you know, listening to the podcast and hanging out in the chat rooms and that kind of stuff, that's also a really good way to get the right expert that's ready to help you in your jurisdiction or online.
Yeah, exactly. Because I would say in the consulting that I do, the things that I actually get done with people are things that like setting up trezors and talking about how, you know, exchanges, things that the average person could do, just doesn't know how to yet. Whereas, but I would say probably half of my consulting is finding people who can help them with bigger issues like paper wallets. Now, I mean, I got you answering all these great questions, so I'm going to ask one more on this topic, which I know you can help with, and I've spent a lot of time in the last few weeks working on. The bigger question, especially when the price is moving up, is how to buy it. It's very hard. We all know that Coinbase, even at its best, is very difficult. You have to get approved. You get the exchange limits. They do all kinds of things to you. A lot of the other exchanges that are well known have their own issues, some better than others. I am very encouraged by what I see with Bitflyer, which just came on, the Japanese exchange, but it's brand new. And then, of course, is the issue of OTC, when people want to buy without limits or in size or overseas. So tell me, what are some of the recommendations you'd give for people who are trying to buy? I guess I'd say sell, because not many people are selling at the moment, but they will. What are your recommendations?
Right. So, I mean, generally speaking, there's two major different ways to purchase Bitcoin. The first one is to fund an account on an exchange and trade with someone on an open order book. And that's option one. And option two is to buy Bitcoin directly from someone without necessarily having an intermediary. So the main difference between the two that I found to be relevant is that when you're buying Bitcoin on an exchange, you're never locking in a rate, and you're not purchasing Bitcoin. So if you're getting new and you want to hop on and on board, you need to understand that by the time that the exchange credits the funds in your exchange account, it may be 2 weeks, and the price may have gone, 50% if we base ourselves, on the crazy last 2 weeks. The difference with, so that's what we would call an exchange. An OTC broker, and we, in Bitcoin, we use terms like OTC and brokerage. They don't necessarily mean what they mean in the traditional financial industry, because to me, a broker might be someone who's selling Bitcoin to his friends on local Bitcoins or operating a Bitcoin ATM, right? So the main difference with OTC is that usually the Bitcoins are either sent or reserved at the time where the payment is made. So you can go to a website, for example, and buy Bitcoins as if you were buying shoes online. You're kind of shopping, and then you're buying them, and the price is reserved at that time. And usually after some time, then your payment is cleared, and the Bitcoins are sent. That's certainly how we do it in Canada in my website, bitcoinoutlet.com. So, for example, when you want to buy Bitcoin, we just say, how much do you want to pay? Say $5,000. We lock in a rate. And we suggest a rate, and then as soon as you upload a photo of a wire or a photo of a check, or if you do an online payment, those are instantly locked in. So that's kind of the main difference. So buying on an exchange isn't that difficult. I like to tell a lot of new users to avoid the exchanges, but it's not actually that difficult. What you really need to realize is that if you buy Bitcoins on an exchange, the price of value may go up and you may not be able to withdraw. The limits are always in US dollars. So if you had like a Bitcoin sitting on an exchange and it was $200, now it's worth 15 grand. You can only withdraw $1,000 a day. You're kind of and also understand that main difference is also that the exchanges will credit the Bitcoin in their wallet. It's signed to your name when you purchase them, whereas a broker like a Bitcoin ATM or an online website or local Bitcoins will send it directly to your wallet outside of the platform, which can make a huge difference. So if you are able to go to a Bitcoin ATM and the fees are less than 10%, I would go for that option if you're a new user. And 10% fees might seem like it's absolutely ridiculous, but it is not when you look at the volatility of Bitcoin and when you look at the fact that what you're paying for, it's the instantaneity of getting Bitcoin in your wallet, in your pocket at that price on that date, which is a premium, a premium feature that you may be willing to go to. Next is and also,
I'll add to that also. Of course, if you've been on exchanges for a while, you will have those kind of limits, but most people getting in don't. And yes, you can send wires to these exchanges, which will allow you to buy as soon as they get the money. But you'll probably have limits on that, and you'll pay a little less, but you'll have limits on it. And of course, there's the withdrawal issue, as opposed to a broker where you pretty much, in most cases, have an unlimited amount you can buy. And you will pay 5 to 10% above or below if you're selling for it.
Yeah. So another huge trade-off is obviously the amount of information that you have to give in the KYC level of that trade and the privacy of that trade. So for example, and that's also linked also to the limits, because the limits are used by exchanges as a KYC AML policy in some capacity, money laundering prevention policy. So another huge thing is like trades with brokers. If a trade with a broker is 100% anonymous, it doesn't mean that it's illegal, but that's definitely a red flag, because at least in the US and in Canada, even brokers should be doing a little bit of KYC AML. What you want to avoid doing is buying Bitcoins from a broker, and that broker is actually, a Silk Road vendor, which is offloading his dirty Bitcoins onto you. So that's what you need to be careful. So OTC trades, try to go with reputable people. Really put yourself in the shoes of a regulator being around that trade. Does it look like it's compliant to regulation? That's a good way for large amounts. For small amounts, I wouldn't be too stressed about that. But be careful with large cash transactions as well. So large cash transactions are subject to many different regulations that are not related to Bitcoin. So that's one thing that you need to think about. In terms of OTC, if you're looking to, I usually call a large amount something over $10,000, right? So if you're looking to invest under $10,000, there's many different ways you can do it. You can go to an ATM over a few days, and you can go on an exchange. You can go on an online website. In Europe, there's a few websites where you can buy with a credit card and get some Bitcoins. I usually consider the big Bitcoin brokers won't really be bothered under that amount. And amounts like $50 to $100,000, you can go to mid-sized brokers like myself, or you can go to ATM operators directly. For amounts over $50,000, there are professional brokers in the US that are available. I'm going to give a shout out to Cumberland Mining. I don't work for them. I'm actually not paid by them at all. But I've sent a lot of people over to Cumberland Mining to do some sophisticated investors that want to get a huge exposure to cryptocurrencies, and they've been of a really good help. So try to think about all these issues, and always, if you're not sure if it's the right time, the answer is dollar cost average your purchase or your sale, because these things move really quickly, and you don't want to be buying at a top when there's a dip following just a few hours later. So I would say, divide your purchase by 10 slots, and do, you know, every day or every couple of days. If you're more conservative, do it over a few months. Don't try to time it. Once you've made your decision to buy Bitcoin, stop timing it, because a lot of people made their decisions to buy Bitcoin in April, and they were trying to time it, and they're like, no, 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 no. And what they should have done is, once you've made your decision, start buying. And Jesus, if you want to buy $10,000, you better have 100 already, right? I mean, if you're gonna buy $1,000 of Bitcoin, you better have your wallet. You better have a few hundred Bitcoins on there to understand how it works. Don't buy 10 grand on your first trade. If you do want to buy 10 grand and you don't have Bitcoin, buy 200, and then wait a couple of days, and then buy 1,000 every day for 10 days.
Okay, and I'll just finish this topic before our final question by saying again, you know, he's talking about Cumberland. Cumberland is like an institutional. I mean, they do minimum trades of $100,000. They vet their clients, so you will become like a proprietary client of theirs, and that's for big scale. But if you're smaller than a $100,000 minimum, please give myself or Francis a call. We will be able to put you in touch with people who can handle trades of all sizes. And again, I'm going to give a shout out. I know it's early, but this BitFlyer, it's the biggest Japanese exchange. They just opened a USA office. It's right now just Bitcoin, but it won't be for long. It is remarkable. I mean, you think about Coinbase's website. They're getting approved. There's no AML KYC. You can get approved for $50,000 trading limits per day almost instantaneously. And they don't have politics and Roger Ver involved. So just, you know, if we're going to be, you know, trying to take Coinbase a little out of the equation, I think that's a good place to start. Okay, and finally, before we go, I'm going to ask you what I asked Adam last week, but I'm going to ask Richard Hart next week when he joins me, is your view of what some of the key 2018 crypto themes are going to be regarding investment themes, political changes, both inside and out, and technological innovation.
Right, so I think 2018 is going to be the year of Bitcoin as a smart contracts platform. I think this narrative is going to become much, much more prevalent for many reasons. First one is Lightning Network coming online. Lightning Network is, in my opinion, the most sophisticated smart contract system there is in the blockchain industry right now. Essentially, these enforceable off-chain transactions, which are at a later point cleared in the blockchain and which are enforced by these conditions. I think it's absolutely breathtaking and fantastic that this is going to go live in 2018. We also have Rootstock, which is coming out, which are a smart contract platform on Bitcoin. We also have a new smart contract language that just came out from Blockstream, a new smart contract language that came out from Chain. So Bitcoin as an infrastructure for financial institutions to do their smart contracts proof of concept is going to gain a lot of steam. You're going to see the sidechains elements, a platform of Blockstream that is going to gradually become one of the dominant private chains platform in the industry, displacing Ethereum and Hyperledger and Corda. What you're also going to see is just this whole shift of narrative. For example, I'm pretty sure that over the next year we're going to see a very, very sophisticated competitor to ERC20, which is going to be built on Bitcoin. Which scales extremely better than Bitcoin, regular Bitcoin transactions. So I think the future ICOs and tokenizations are going to be happening as meta protocols on top of Bitcoin. In terms of politics, you know, the year 2017, I'm going to do my year's review. I call it the awakening. 2017, I think, was an awakening of many things, of kind of the sleeping dragon, the kind of fighting spirit of the Bitcoiners, that, you know, we're kind of like this, we're just doing our thing and we're all kind of happy moving the Bitcoin forward. But I think the honey badger really showed its true colors. So going forward, I think that these kind of political grabs at Bitcoin are going to be instantly and immediately and ferociously defended by people like us and people that have kind of given it their mandate. I think you're going to see a lot more, I guess, pundits to gain a lot of pundits have been like Bitcoin pundits have been becoming one of the main sources of information, trusted source of information, certainly over websites and news agencies. That's going to continue. In terms of markets, I mean, it's 2018. I'm not sure I'm that excited actually about the markets in 2018. We'll see. I don't usually I don't really like to predict the future when it comes to price, but I think we've really, I mean, Bitcoin, when you think about it, we're still very, very, very early. I think there's a lot of attention that came into Bitcoin. So we had, we had the peak of inflated expectation in 2014, which went away in favor of the blockchain hype. And with Bitcoin coming back up, we might hit another peak of inflated expectation. Lightning is going to take a long time to get rolled out. We're not going to see, Lightning is a really long process. We're not going to see SegWit, even though it reduces the fees. We're not going to see a huge reduction in the fees caused by SegWit. One thing you can expect for sure is that the fees will probably continue to rise as the price of Bitcoin rises and as the transactions are more popular. The FUD surrounding that is gonna be very, very strong. So that's something you can absolutely predict, that the fees will be very high in 2018. In terms of the mining, mining is getting decentralized. I know that for a fact. Why? Because all sorts of miners from China are rushing and calling all the hydro companies in Canada, all the Bitcoin people trying to find locations for their miners. Canada is becoming a huge player, but all sorts of countries are becoming huge players. So I see 2018 being also a year where the dominance of Bitmain is going to gradually go away as other mining, including, for example, the Japanese mining manufacturers and the Heilong, so the Dragon chips, so the Bitcoin Core friendly mining manufacturers. So 2018, I hope, is going to be the year where Bitmain loses its hold on Bitcoin. And yeah, I mean, 2017 was Bitcoin's best year yet. 2018, we have a fresh bunch of challenges ahead, which are mostly centered around the transaction fees and scalability. Now the roadblocks have been removed. The expectations are at their height. Expectations are going to be disappointed because the rollout of scaling is going to be much lower than people think. However, there's all sorts of good things that are coming in. 2018 is going to be also the year where hopefully we get a solid privacy proposal to get into Bitcoin. That's going to be either something like confidential transactions by Gregory Maxwell or something else. I think the privacy altcoins, there's going to be, Monero and Zcash and Dash. Their value proposition, Dash is not even a privacy altcoin anymore. It's like more of a competitor to Bcash for fast transactions. But you look at Zcash and Monero, I think that value proposition is going to start to go down. So the introduction of those new technologies will make Bitcoin, much more competitive versus the other alts. However, I need to tell people to be prepared that I don't personally foresee the transaction fees going down, and I think that's going to be a real tough challenge. And just make sure that you keep everyone's expectations in check, because even though the price went up really, really high and everything seems to be going well, you never know what's in store for the next year. Scaling is definitely difficult.
Well, that's for sure. We on Sunday certainly didn't know what was in store coming on Tuesday. But yeah. I'll just finish by commenting on what you're saying. It's so funny that you're talking about scalability being the big issue, when everyone thinks that we just solved scalability. And to an extent, we did. I mean, frankly, the only real issue that has people terribly worried is that you have this Bcash out there that is kind of creating a quote scaling debate that doesn't really exist, as in we can do it better, when in fact of course they can't do it better. It's just that they want you to think that they should be worth more because they say they can, and there's no way that they can do it better, because anything they can do, Bitcoin could do a lot better. But yes, we have all the technological going.
Exactly. Scaling, we removed the obstacles that we had to scale. We gave ourselves all the tools that were needed to scale. But to scale, like, the core dev's job is done, right? So Bitcoin Core has done its job. SegWit is in Bitcoin Core, and the Lightning Network is coming out. So if we want to scale, we just need to use them, right? So businesses need to integrate Lightning Network, because Lightning Network is completely useless if nobody's using it. So that's what I mean. So we were saying to everyone, we will scale once we have these SegWit, and we will because once we have SegWit, we will have Lightning, and once we have Lightning and sidechains, we will use them and deploy them. Now it's the we will deploy them phase. So let's really not sit on our laurels at this point. And that's the challenge that I've been giving everyone is, this is also the year where I think people have money. A lot of you guys have a lot of money. If you want to see lightning, help build it. This is if you want to get retired because you're crypto rich, don't wait 1 year, wait 2 years. Spend a year or two giving back to the community by helping build a Lightning network. And how do you do that? When you can hire developers for your own business to integrate Lightning. You can make a consulting service to help other businesses integrate Lightning. You can fund Lightning projects. You can fund open source development. You can lobby exchanges. You can invest in Bitcoin startups that are trying to do these kind of things. So 2018 is the year where I say, go build it yourself if you want to see it.
Right, but the other side of it is you are speaking of someone who is so deeply into the business side of things. Frankly, of all the guests that I've had, not a single person actually is in the business side. They have some knowledge of how a lot of things work, specific things, but not like this. And I'm saying, yes, scaling, we're in the middle of a technological innovation. Fortunately, because the price is so high and because all the institutions are coming in, that money is definitely going to be available, and it hasn't been before. And if it was available before, we probably wouldn't have had to deal with all this stuff this year. But the other thing that's countervailing the scaling issue, and it's extremely positive, is look, we are now an asset class. Okay, when I said when we got to 100 billion, that's what's going to happen. Sure enough, we hit 300 billion a month later. The money is coming in because it's digital gold. The money that's coming in as digital gold doesn't care if we get Lightning Network in a year or two. It cares that the network is immutable and that it can replace gold and replace pretty much treasury bonds that are trading at no yields. That's what so that was the biggest issue for me as a monetary guy. I was scared that Roger Ver could break the belief in immutability. He has not done that, and he has not broken the network, but he has certainly caused a lot of trouble. And I think as more of that big money comes in, he's going to be rendered more and more marginalized unless they actually do something. And we know that they can't do something. But yes, we have had a huge surge in expectations, which is hard to measure against what the expectations are. But I will say the expectations in $70 billion Ethereum, which has to compete with Rootstock and all these other actual business applications, is a lot higher than $300 billion Bitcoin competing with others for gold. Yeah.
And I think we've done a fantastic job in Bitcoin to keep the expectations at least reasonable as compared to the other cryptocurrencies. So absolutely, and I'm not worried. I'm not necessarily worried about the expectations of Bitcoin not being fulfilled and going to other alts, because the other alts, 2018 is the year where I think the Ethereum bubble, the whole Ethereum show is going to get revealed to the world. That yes, it was cool tech, but it went from world computer. Someone did this quote on Twitter. It went from world computer to token funder to I don't know what it is now.
It's a $70 billion speculative tech stock with a very computable technology that is run by a handful of people. So yes, it could be a big winner, but man, it could also be a big loser too. And that's why I have no interest in it, even though it may well be a big winner. So with that, we're going to conclude today's extremely timely podcast. I mean, Francis, you are absolutely amazing. People, you have to follow him at Twitter at Francis Pouliot. Look at him on all the popular podcasts. And of course, probably we talked about Francis at SatoshiPortal.com. You can get in contact with him. His companies are Cadillaxy.com. They're in Montreal. And Bills, BYLLS, payment processor, also in Canada, because I know he's going to be able to help you. And certainly, I can also help you with consultancies of different kinds, particularly here in the States. Again, as for me, check out my website, CryptoGoldCentral.com. Sign up for a whole year for $225 or a free trial subscription, and you can contact me at ahoffman@CryptoGoldCentral.com. Thanks very much, and have a great crypto day.